Yo, what's good, Spirit Squad? It's your boy Dre, and today what we're doing is a quick meta celebration, and we're going to take a look at how Spirits has adjusted to reflect what the metagame is currently doing. After that, I think I'll actually have a sample deck list for us too to take a look at, so that we can continue to adapt to what the meta is doing. So, on to the meta celebration part of things. Spirits is overperforming something fierce right now. So if we take a look at the modern trophy list, right? So Spirits pilot Dr. Queller is all the way at the top of the meta list with 39 trophies. That is actually absurd. So the deck obviously looks really good already, right? But also, we've had a couple of recent trophy finishes. We've had, I think three out of the last four top 8s in the challenges have actually featured at least one Spirits pilot. So let's go ahead and kind of verify that one. So I'm going to pull up MTG Goldfish. Here's Spirits. And yeah, this is crazy actually. So like Modern Challenge on the 3rd, Spirits top 8. Modern Challenge on the 2nd, Spirits top 8. And I do know that a blue-white Spirits pilot, a Brazilian player, actually won today's Modern Challenge. So yeah, that's 3 out of the last 4 challenges have all featured a top 8 of Spirits, which is insane. Like that's we're doing really well right now. And a lot of the reasons for that is this deck list right here. We'll see that aside from 4 main deck Aether Vials, there are no non-creature spells in the main deck, which means that we almost never actually run out of gas. And that's kind of the formula that Humans has gone with for a few years now. They've just gone, okay, here's a ton of threats, here's 4 Aether Vials, deal with it or else. And a lot of the time the opponent simply can't deal with it, and that's why we've been winning so much. And of course, unlike Humans, all of our cards protect each other, so it's very hard for removal-based decks to actually plow through us. So, speaking of removal-based decks, we're actually going to take a look at what the meta looks like right now. We've got a couple of Uro decks at the top of the metagame, nothing surprising there. These are decks that like Mausoleum Wander and Rattle Chains are great against. We've got Hammer Time, and everybody needs to know by now that this deck is not a meme. Like, we need to have a very real plan for this deck at all times. Luckily, we do as Spirits pilots. We've got both versions of the black-red decks out right now. So, like, the slower mid-range version with, like, Liliana and, like, Seasoned Pyromancer and stuff like that. But also regular Death Shadow that we've seen for a couple of months now, featuring Shadow, Scourge of Skyclave, all of those kind of guys, right? And then everything else is kind of your usual suspects here. So we've got Helia Company, we've got Blue-Red Blitz, and that's kind of the spot where Mono Red Prowess used to live. We got Eladamri's Toolbox. Hey, surprise, another Uro list. Traditional Burn is back in the meta, which I think is a great sign of format stability. And what I mean by that is that, you know, Modern wants to be a turn 4 format, right? Whenever a turn 3 or a turn 2 deck is all the way at the top of the metagame, that is usually a sign that something is going to get banned soon. For example, Hogak, something got banned. Storm, something got banned. And other things like that have made it so, you know, turn 4 is about where the format typically wants to live. Granted, there are some decks like Hammer Time and Oops All Spells that break that rule, but the norm should be that you expect to die around turn 4, sometimes 5. So if Burn is able to survive in a format, that's usually a great litmus test of the format's health. If Burn is able to thrive in a format, that generally means that the format is about where Wizards wants it to be, which is great news for us. Because in a format where you can expect to live until turn 4 or 5, that means that we generally have enough time to set up things like Drogsko Captain and Spell Queller and stuff like that. So, great times for us. Death and Taxes, Oops All Spells, look at this, Mills in the format, Amulet Titan, Ad Nauseum, and a lot of these are decks that we're really good against, right? So, the fact that we are good against so many of the top decks is exactly why we've been doing so much winning. And I think this is what I would do with the format, and I think I'll stream this list a couple of times this week too. And the reason I wanted to highlight specifically this list, and because I'm not necessarily going to say future-proof against the format, but I do think I want to plan for what the format's doing in the next few weeks, right? So, like, lots of black-red, lots of Uro decks, lots of, like, combo decks are around, which means I think it's a great time for us to be able to play cards like Unsettled Mariner and Thalia again, which wonderful, great times, right? So this list follows the same rule that a lot of the other Spirits pilots in the format are doing. 36 creatures, 4 non-creature spells, everything else is a land, and a lot of our lands will do stuff too. So we've got 2 Moorland Haunts, we've got a Silent Clearing and a Waterlogged Grove, so that we have a couple of draw lands, like so these really good canopy lands. We've got 3 Cavern of Souls, so that everything in our deck is basically uncounterable. And I think that sets us up to be in a great place against the format. So here we've got our usual suspects, just a pile of spirits, right? And between Skyclave Apparition and Shacklegeist, most of the opponent's bigger creatures like Tarmogoyfs, Death Shadow, Scourges, Skyclaves, not really too much of an issue for us, which is super nice. And then on the spells end of things, we've got, again, our usual suspects of Spell Queller, Mausoleum Wanderer, right? But also, this specific list is going to play Unsettled Mariner and Thalia. And since we're only playing Aether Vial as non-creature spells, Thalia presents next to 0 downside for us. I think that is absolutely perfect in a place where spells are very, very good. Like, there's lots of Thought Seizes, lots of Fatal Pushes, Lightning Bolts, tons of cards like Kolaghan's Commands, and I think like Unsettled Mariner and Thalia do some very solid work against those. And also, the graveyard's a huge resource right now. As we saw earlier on the meta sheet, right? We saw that, like, Oops All Spells is a thing, Dredge is a thing, we've got, like, these decks which use, like, Seasoned Pyromancer, Kroxa, Luris, well, actually, tons of Luris decks, all kinds of things that use the graveyard, right? So we actually have a copy of Remorseful Cleric in the main deck, and then 4 additional copies of Graveyard Hate in the board. I'm choosing 2 Remorseful Clerics and 2 Grafdigger's Cage. A lot of people are going with Rest in Peace rather than Grafdigger Cage. That's okay. I like the turn 1 solution. A lot of people like playing Rest in Peace because it's a stronger card. Makes sense to me. So whichever you kind of choose there. And then the rest of the sideboard contains a lot of hate for things that we kind of need to be careful about, right? So Path to Exile just randomly hits any creature-style decks, so like any of the Death Shadows, Scourge of the Skyclaves, Hammer Time, all of that stuff that, you know, plays a lot of creatures that are just bigger than 2/2s. Because, let's be real, our deck is still just a bunch of 2/2s at the end of the day. We've got 2 Ceremonious Rejection, and I think this card has a lot of play too. So it hits Hammer Time, it hits Tron. Now, don't get me wrong, there is still a lot of Tron in the format. Just because it's not at the top of the meta list does not mean you will not play against it. It shows up all the time. But it also has play against like Charbelcher, against Oops All Spells with their Pentad Prisms and their green-black mana rock. I think Ceremonious Rejection has some real play in the meta right now. It's got a Pithing Needle, and that actually serves a lot of function too. So like it helps against things like, I don't know, like Stoneforge Mystic. It helps against like Planeswalkers like Ren and 6. It just does a lot of very solid work, right? The Remorseful Clerics we've already mentioned. 3 copies of Core Firewalker, and this is a spot that a lot of people are debating on whether they want to play Core Firewalker more than Auriok Champion, or whether they want to play Auriok Champion more than Core Firewalker. My advice to you is that I believe this is actually going to be a you pick one for your personal choice kind of thing. Now, even though we have a lot of a lot of red-black at the top of the meta, I think specifically Spirits is more scared of the mono-red decks than we are of the black-red decks. So I am choosing to play Core Firewalker. However, that does not mean that Core Firewalker is necessarily a stronger or better choice. If you find yourself playing against a lot of Death Shadow style decks, and not so much against Prowess and regular Burn and Blue-Red Blitz, then play Auriok Champion. So that one, purely personal choice. You play whatever you feel comfortable with. And also just rounding out the sideboard, we've got an Aether Gust primarily for the card Primeval Titan, but it does a lot of other solid work as well. And a Damping Sphere, which serves double duty against Amulet Titan, which is all over the place again, and Tron, which you'll still fight. It also helps against decks like Storm and stuff too, which, thanks to Thalia and Unsettled Mariner being back in the main, we're pretty good against. And there's a few flex spots in this, right? So, like, a lot of people are playing, like, Rest in Peace over Grafdigger's Cage, for example. A lot of people are playing, like, Force of Negation, Unified Will, Teferi Time Raveler to help fight against, like, the Uro decks, against, like, Blue-Red Living End, which, for some reason, is making a huge comeback right now. Like, the miscellaneous Jace the Mind Sculptor, Snapcaster Mage control decks that are running around. There's just a lot going on in this format, and I think we're pretty well suited to fight against a lot of it. So, as I said, a great meta celebration, right? And this is gonna be a real good spot for us to be able to play, like I said, things like Thalia, things like Unsettled Mariner, cards like Force Negation if you want to be on those, and just really the format's all over the place, and we are in a great adjustable position where we can kind of like adapt our 5 or 6 flex spots to basically whatever we want, and it's working. Like, the current trophy leader, like I said, is on Spirits. Today's Modern Challenge winner was on Spirits. We've had 3 Spirits decks in the last 4 Modern Challenge top 8s. Like, the deck is real, it's solid, and it's doing great work. So let me know in the comments exactly what you're doing with your Spirits list and how much success you're having lately. And I will be streaming right around 12 o'clock noon on some days, Eastern Standard Time this week. So just make sure to kind of subscribe to the channel so that you can actually see the streams when they do go live. Give a like to the video if you, of course, like the content. And yeah, I will see y'all in the next one. Thanks for watching.